In today's episode of Free Mama Radio, I am unpacking my 5 biggest lessons learned in 2020. Stay around. It's been quite a year.
You're listening to Free Mama Radio, where we believe you can have both a successful business and show up as the mom you want to be. I'm your host, Lauren Golden, a mom who built a full-time income working part-time hours. Now, I help other moms like you learn how to work from home on your own terms, take control of your schedule, and make more money so you can live a totally awesome, guilt-free life. I am on a mission to make sure that no mother has to choose between family and financial stability. So if you've been wondering, can I really have it all? This podcast will give you the answers.
Hey mamas, welcome back to another episode of Free Mama Radio. It is the last episode of the year. We are almost out of 2020, which for some of us is something we've been holding our breath for since we started virtual homeschooling back in March. But for others of us, we've actually experienced a lot of prosperity in this year. And it can be really hard to reconcile those feelings. I know a lot of my students had their highest grossing months and year this year, which is amazing. But a lot of people were also hurting and suffering. And it's just been really, really fascinating. And this Thursday, if you are on my email list, we are going to share with you our 20 things that we are celebrating in 2020, because I think it is always important, no matter how bad things get, to find those silver linings. And we've had some true blessings in our business and our life this year. So I'm super excited to share that list with you later this week, because by Friday, we will be in a new year. Ladies, can you believe it? Oh my goodness gracious. Today, though, I am going to unpack for you my 5 biggest lessons learned, because the truth of the matter is, if we're not learning, we're not growing. And if we're not growing, we're going to have a hard time reaching those big goals that we set for ourselves. So it's important, I think, before we look forward, before we get into the New Year's resolutions and the goal setting and all of these things, which I think is important. And at this point, you've probably already done some of this work, which is great. You're going to be ready to run into January. But I think it's a really big missed opportunity not to take a pause and look backwards and reflect on what went well and what didn't go well. And, you know, what have I learned from the things that didn't go well? Because the matter of it is that so many of us are afraid to move forward because we're afraid of failure, but it's actually in our failures that the biggest room for learning and growth takes place. So I'm super excited to unpack these 5 things for you. I've got a little mix of personal and professional to share with you, but these are my 5 biggest takeaways from this year. So the first is, I can do hard things. And while my capacity is ever expanding, it is not limitless. And I know that if you have children who are school-aged, that you probably felt this pretty hard this year as well. I know that I took on more than I really ever thought possible. I never considered homeschooling before getting into all of this chaos with virtual learning and so much unknown. And really, it was this summer when my husband and my children and I were on our RV trip and getting messages from the school district we were in that were contradicting each other almost on a daily basis, that we really realized that it was not going to work for us and for our family and for our businesses and our kiddos' learning styles to not be in control of their education. And so with everything else going on, we actually decided to withdraw our oldest 2 and not send Audrey back to preschool so that we could homeschool them. And it, without a doubt, has been one of the hardest undertakings. It's been so rewarding. There have been so many positive things that have come out of being homeschooling parents. And at the same time, there have been many days where I felt like I was at my breaking point and just could not take it all on. I just could not do one more thing. And if you know me, if you've ever read my book, or maybe even just seen the back cover of my book, you know that I do believe in the have it all lifestyle. I believe that we can have it all. I just don't believe that having it all is the same thing as doing it all. And there were definitely times in 2020 where I was really flirting with that line. I really do think that while I took on things that were hard, and I took on things that really expanded my capacity for giving to those around me, I also really started to notice, I think as a result of all of this expansion, that we are not limitless. We do have limits, and it is imperative that we take care of ourselves and that we ask for help when we need it, and that we reach out to our partners or our family or our friends and we speak up about those things that are overwhelming us or that we simply cannot take on anymore. And this is why I'm a huge proponent in general of outsourcing. But when families are quarantined, sometimes outsourcing gets a little tricky as well. And what's really cool is that this journey about learning that I can do hard things with my expanding capacity that is not limitless, I also got really in touch with my body and my mind and my sanity. And I think it was because 2020 required us to stay home. There was some stillness that was going on. There wasn't the walking back and forth to school every day and running errands and dropping off at activities and social interactions that there previously were for all of us in our routines. There was a stillness that came about this year. And as a result, I'm super grateful, but it kind of set me on this new spiritual awakening, for lack of a better term, that if you are a member of the Free Mama Squad or if you attended Free Mama Live this year, you know about this because I took you on it with me. And I realized that there was a lot of cyclicality going on in my mind, in my mood, in my own limiting beliefs and self-sabotage, and that it was actually quite predictable and in alignment with my menstrual cycle. And so I kind of went on this journey where I started reading books, and we read a couple of them in our book club, and we had some speakers come and talk to us about this. And I actually ended up hiring a new lifestyle coach to help me reconcile all of these things and go, you know what? I don't have to be on and be my best self every day. And anybody who's a high achiever is like, say what? I don't? No, you don't. And actually our body, much like the moon, much like the seasons here on planet Earth, there are cycles, and each of those cycles serve a purpose. And some of them require us to get still and slow down. And so between getting in touch with my mind, body, and spirit, and this new appreciation for being able to do hard things that really reminds me of when you have a new child. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. You have your first child and you're like, oh my gosh, I love this thing so much. And then you find out you're pregnant with your second and you're like, how could I possibly love another child as much as I love this child? And then the baby's born and you do, right? Like our love though is limitless. It is ever expanding, but it is not limitless. Whereas our capacity to do does have limits. And it's really important that we get in touch with our bodies and our minds, and we honor the two together. And while we can do hard things, we do need support, and we do need seasons of rest as well. The second biggest thing that I was reminded of this year, I think I knew this, I think I believed this as someone who's always set goals, both personally in my marriage. My husband and I love to do goal setting together. We always have. We actually met at a summer internship program for college students called University of Dreams. So we are both pretty goal, dream oriented people. But I was really reminded this year that goals are dreams with a plan. And that all came about, a lot of you have probably heard this story before, but my husband and I went on an 8-week RV trip this summer. It is something that we have been talking about doing as a dream, that far off, intangible thing that may or may not happen in the future, since before we even got married. We had talked about getting an RV and traveling around the country. And it was actually probably last fall, last summer, where we started talking about it. Like, what if we actually did this like before our kids, were out of the house, and before we were old and had a bad back and bad knees, and, we could really appreciate it and experience it with our entire family. And so a couple of weeks before COVID became a thing in the United States, we actually purchased an RV. And this was not an accident. This was not on a whim. This was not a coincidence. This was because we started talking about our dreams like they were a reality, not a far off thing in the future. And we put a plan in place. We turned our dream into SMART goals that were specific and measurable, with a timeline attached to them, that were realistic for us and our family. And we put a plan in place to be able to take the time off, to be able to, coordinate our trip, and to be able to invest in having an RV. And we did all of the research involved and this took place over months. And because of COVID, we almost didn't go. And we decided that, we didn't want to live in fear. Of course, we wanted to be smart and safe, and we were those things. And we're pretty much in the middle of nowhere, outdoors for the majority of the trip, but we went for it. And I'm so grateful that we did, because it was such a tremendous reminder that we are our biggest limits as people. We will be able to do and achieve whatever we put our minds to. It sounds so cliche, but you guys, seriously, your life and your business, for that matter, will never surpass your belief in yourself. And as soon as my husband and I believed that this RV trip was possible, we put it into a SMART goal, and then we backtracked from there and did all of the planning steps necessary to be able to make it happen. And honestly, sitting here in December of 2020, knowing that that trip now is months behind us, this thing that we've talked about for over a decade, and it's happened, and now it's like almost becoming a memory in the past. I mean, it's just really, really, really crazy. And so I just wanted to share that with you, because I know that someone listening really needs to hear that what you're thinking about, what you're already dreaming about for 2021, don't make it a dream. Turn it into a SMART goal. Get a plan, get the accountability and support that you need to execute on that plan. And you will start to be able to achieve extraordinary things, because your belief in what's possible is also going to continue to evolve. Okay, my third biggest takeaway from 2020 is actually a quote from Free Mama Live, which happened back in October, which I still cannot get out of my mind. If you guys were not at that event, you guys, please do not miss the next event that we do. The speakers are so powerful, and the camaraderie and relationships, it's really insane. But this year we decided to have a diversity in business panel. And this is something that came about after Black Lives Matter and the shooting of George Floyd back in May of this year, and all of the conversations taking place that are so painful and so hurtful for so many people. And it felt irresponsible not to have a conversation and create a space within the Free Mama community to have this dialogue, because it's hard. And I'm a white woman, and I can't lead the conversation, but I can hold the space for it and challenge myself and others to get uncomfortable. And one of our speakers during this panel said something that I think of every single day. She said, "Do you want to be right, or do you want to be effective?" And I can't stop thinking about that, because I have been trying to do the work this year, and I've had some major failures in this department because I didn't know better until we do know better, and that's when we do better. I've listened to books, I've donated to causes, I've had conversations with some of you who are listening right now on this topic, and I've tried to hold this space. But the truth of the matter is that unwrapping privilege, white privilege, it's really hard. It's really uncomfortable, and I'm here for it. Don't get me wrong, but it's uncomfortable. And so there have definitely been a couple of moments this year that I'm not proud of myself for. And it's because I hadn't heard these brilliant words of, do you want to be right, or do you want to be effective? So whether we're talking about race, politics, religion, money, anything, any of these like seemingly taboo topics that for some reason in our country we have such a hard time navigating with respect and empathy and compassion, I just will never not hear these words echoing in my ears. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be effective? And like I said, I've made a couple of mistakes this year that I'm not proud of, but I own them. And I made them not because I think that I'm a horrible person, but I think because I was trying to be right. And I've just really learned in a very painful public way that that's not productive, and it's spoiled relationships, which I really, really regret. But I'm so grateful for the growth that has come from being put in these situations, and for the beautiful relationships that I have with people who have, enlightened me and shared with me and been willing to watch me make mistakes and stand with me as I try to do better, because like I said, I'm here for it. So If you are looking for some resources, we have those available for you, and we will put those over on freemamaradio.com for you. We will also make sure that we give you access to an episode of Free Mama Radio where you can actually hear where this quote was said. We actually pulled the footage from the diversity and business panel and turned it into a podcast episode because it really was that impactful. So that is definitely one of my biggest takeaways from this year, which brings me to, I'm consulting my notes here, which brings me to number 4, which is that you can't go backwards. You guys, you can't go backwards. And I'm so grateful for this because I really struggled. My family decided to move back to Kansas City this year. We moved right after Free Mama Live, which I do not recommend going through a major business event and a major life event simultaneously. It is horrible. But I was telling myself a lot of stories about what that meant, and going back to my hometown and, kind of old patterns and old people and old routines that knew a different version of me. I've really changed and evolved intentionally and not intentionally as a result of growing into this role of entrepreneur. And so many of my relationships look different. And I was really nervous about what that would mean to be quote unquote going home. And am so grateful for so many brilliant people in my life that reminded me that just because I'm physically going back doesn't mean that my mindset goes backwards. It doesn't mean that, the work that I've done on my money mindset, goes back to point A. It doesn't mean that, boundaries that I had before will automatically be those boundaries now. I get to define those things, and I get to take everything that I've worked for, everything that I've learned, every relationship that I've developed since then, and all of these things, I get to bring them with me. I just get to bring them with me to a new familiar location. And so I say this to you because I hear this from a lot of free mamas who, maybe you are wanting to change your niche, or maybe you are wanting to start a totally new business and you're evolving and you're growing. And I've had so many students make remarks to me of like, well, it just feels like I'm starting over. And I always find that so fascinating because my response to them is much like what my mentor's response was to me. You're never starting over. You get to bring with you every experience you've had until this date. And what a beautiful, powerful gift that experience is, because in case you didn't know, experience is exactly where confidence comes from. Confidence doesn't generate out of thin air. It doesn't come out of a self-development book. It doesn't even come from listening to this podcast, you guys. It comes from doing hard things and learning from them and then getting better. It comes from repetition, right? Like that's where confidence comes from. And so as you begin a new path or a new journey, or you pivot or you evolve, you get to bring all those former iterations of yourself with you into this new business. And so you're never starting over. You're not going backwards. You're just walking down a new road, as my family and I decided to do this year, which is pretty cool. And last but not least, my 5th biggest takeaway, we're getting a little nerdy here, so everybody put on your blue light covered glasses and get nerdy with me. But the last takeaway that I have for the year is to get super specific with measuring success. So I already talked about SMART goals, specific, measurable, right? All the things. But what I realized this year is that I don't necessarily communicate what that means to the other people in my life, or always even for myself. I don't always have a threshold for what measuring success looks like. And the challenge with that when you're working with other people, whether you now are outsourcing to people on your own team, or if you're on someone else's team, is it means that expectations are not being clearly communicated. And there were several times, especially as I was traveling this summer or heading into my event, where I realized I was expecting things of my team, but I had not clearly communicated what success with these projects or these requests actually was going to look like. And so there were times where I ended up either frustrated or disappointed, and I had to take complete ownership for that because I hadn't clearly articulated what success looked like anyway. And so this is something that I got called out on big time from one of my mentors heading into Free Mama Live, because I had goals around the marketing side of things. I had goals for how many people were going to attend, how many people were signing up at the different ticket levels, how I was going to sell those tickets. And she asked me about my sales goals at the event. And I was like, well, I don't have those. And she's like, well, does your team know what you're working towards? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm working towards. And it was just kind of this not so funny moment where I was like, wow, this you're really just shining a light on something that I've been experiencing for the last several months, but didn't even realize was a problem until I had heard it articulated from somebody else, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And so I feel like I ended with this message in particular for you guys, because we're heading into a new year. Get specific about what you want. If you're working with clients and you're not clear what they expect of you, if you haven't defined what success looks like in your role, that's a conversation that you guys should have together, because if you don't know where you're going, you will not know when you arrive there. And one of the things that makes me super frustrated to see from Free Mamas is when we move the goalpost on ourselves. I don't want that for you. I want you to set goals, and I want you to celebrate every single mini win that you have along your Free Mama journey. And I want you to head over to the Free Mama Movement Facebook group, use hashtag Free Mama Win, and share every single one of them with us to your success. Cheers to a happy new year.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Free Mama Radio. Don't forget to check out Free Mama TV right here on YouTube for hundreds of how-to videos and interviews to help you start, grow, and scale a virtual business from home. If you want to join a community of tens of thousands of moms just like you, make sure you join the Free Mama Movement group over on Facebook. And lastly, if you want to learn more about how we can do this together, work to achieve your goals, and make you our next success story, check out my free training at thefreemamamovement.com. I'll see you next time.